The year was 2010, and I was 68 years old, living in a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. My name is Evelyn, but everyone just calls me Grandma Evie. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine that summer, drifting in from the neighbor's garden, and I'd sit on my porch swing most evenings, sipping sweet tea, watching fireflies dance in the dusk. My life wasn't grand, but it was mine, hard-earned, quiet, and full of small joys. I had my routines, morning walks along the bayou, tending to my little vegetable patch, and Sunday dinners with my daughter, Clara, and her two boys. That was before everything changed, before the rains came, before they left me behind, before I realized the secret I'd been keeping in my closet was worth $48 million in Bitcoin, a fortune. I didn't even fully understand. How does a woman like me, a retired school teacher with creaky knees and a penchant for knitting, end up with a treasure like that? And what happens when the world, washes away, leaving you to decide whether to cling to what's left or risk it all on a digital dream? Stick with me, dear ones, because this is a story of loss, betrayal, and a stubborn old lady who refused to give up. If you're moved by what you hear, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and hit that subscribe button. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? It all started with a boy named Tommy, my grandson, barely 22, with a mop of curly hair and a mind that never stopped spinning. He'd come over after school sometimes, back when he was still in college, and talk my ear off about this new thing called cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, he called it. Grandma, he'd say, his eyes bright, it's the future. Digital money, no banks, no government, just you and your wallet. I'd laugh and pat his hand, thinking it was just another of his wild ideas, like the time he tried to build a drone out of my old vacuum cleaner parts. But Tommy was persistent. One Christmas, he gave me a little black box of hardware wallet. He said, "It's got a tiny bit of Bitcoin on it, Grandma. Just hold on to it. One day, it'll be worth something." I tucked it away in my closet, behind my winter coats and a box of my late husband's old records, figuring it was just another trinket from a boy who loved his gadgets. Little did I know that tiny box held the key to a fortune. My life back then was simple. I'd taught third grade for 35 years, shaping young minds with multiplication tables and stories about pioneers. When I retired, I settled into that Houston house, paid off with my teacher's pension and my husband Carl's life insurance. Clara lived nearby with her boys, Tommy and little Ben, who was only 10. We were close, or so I thought. Clara would bring the boys over every Sunday, and we'd make pot roast, laugh over old photo albums, and play cards until the kids got restless. The neighborhood was tight-knit. Folks waved from their porches, and we'd all pitch in when someone's fence went down in a storm. Houston was home, humid and sprawling, with its bayous winding like veins through the city. I never imagined it could turn on me. But then came August, Hurricane Harvey. The news had been buzzing for days, warnings of heavy rain, possible flooding. I'd seen storms before. Houston folks are used to wading through a bit of water. I'd stocked up on canned soup and batteries, boarded up my windows, and figured I'd ride it out like always. Clara called, her voice tight. "Mama, we're heading to Austin to stay with my friend Lisa. You should come with us." I hesitated. My house was my sanctuary, every corner filled with memories. Carl's old armchair, the quilt I'd made for Tommy's birth. "I'll be fine, sweetheart," I told her. "You go take care of the boys." She argued, but I was stubborn. I'd lived through Allison in 01, Ike in 08. What was one more storm? She promised to check on me, and I heard the car pull away, the boys' voices fading into the distance. The rain started that night, soft at first, tapping against my roof like a polite guest. By morning, it was a roar, a relentless pounding that shook the windows. I watched from my porch as the street turned into a river, brown water creeping up driveways, swallowing mailboxes. The bayou was swelling, and the news said it wasn't stopping anytime soon. I tried calling Clara, but the lines were down. My neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, came by, his boots sloshing. "Evie, you gotta get out. They're saying it's gonna get worse." But where would I go? My car was old, and the roads were already half submerged. I told him I'd wait it out. That was my first mistake. By the second day, the water was inside. It seeped under the door, cold and muddy, soaking my rugs. I moved what I could upstairs: photo albums, Carl's records, my mother's china, but the water kept coming. Ankle deep, then knee deep. The power went out, and the house was dark. the only sound, the rain and the gurgle of water, claiming my home. I sat on my staircase, clutching a flashlight, my heart pounding. I kept thinking about Clara and the boys. Were they safe in Austin? Why hadn't they come back for me? I pushed the thought away, telling myself they were probably stuck, worried, sick, but doubt crept in, cold as the water lapping at my feet. On the third day, I heard shouts outside. Rescue boats, men in orange vests were pulling people from their homes. I waded to my porch, waving my flashlight. Over here, I called, my voice hoarse. A young man in a boat saw me, his face grim. Ma'am, we'll get to you, but we're swamped. Hang tight, hang tight. My house was drowning. I watched them pull away, ferrying a young family to safety. I waited hours, turning into another night. The water was up to my thighs now, and I'd retreated to my bedroom, dragging a mattress onto a table to stay dry. My phone was dead, my food was gone, and the air smelled of mud and rot. I was alone, and for the first time, I was truly afraid. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to the rain, praying for rescue. My mind drifted to that little black box in my closet, Tommy's Bitcoin wallet. I'd never paid it much mind, but he'd called a few months back, excited, saying Bitcoin was skyrocketing. Grandma, that wallet's worth millions now. I'd laughed it off, thinking he was exaggerating. But as I sat there, water creeping closer, I wondered, could it be true? Was there really a fortune hidden behind my old coats? And if there was, would it even matter if I didn't make it out of this? The water kept rising, and so did my fear. By the fourth day, it was chest high in the downstairs, a murky soup of debris, splinters of furniture, a neighbor's lawn chair, even a child's stuffed bear floating past like a ghost. I dragged what I could to the attic, my knees aching with every step up the narrow ladder. My flashlight was dimming, and the air was so humid it felt like breathing through a wet cloth. I kept the little black box Tommy's Bitcoin wallet tucked inside my sweater, tied tight against my chest. It was a foolish thing to cling to, maybe, but it felt like a piece of him, a piece of hope. I hadn't heard from Clara or the boys since they left for Austin, and the silence was louder than the rain. Had they tried to call? Were they safe? Or had they forgotten me? I tried to keep my mind busy, humming old hymns my mama taught me, but the water's relentless gurgle drowned them out. I could hear it swallowing my home, the walls groaning under the weight. My wedding photos, Carl's fishing rods, the quilt I'd spent years stitching, they were all gone, claimed by the flood. I sat on an old trunk in the attic, my legs dangling, staring at the trapdoor where water was starting to seep through. My heart raced, and I whispered to myself, Evelyn, you've faced worse. But had I? Teaching rowdy kids, burying Carl after his heart attack, scraping by on a teacher's pension, those were battles I knew. This was something else. This was nature itself, tearing my world apart. I thought about the rescue boats. Why hadn't they come back? I'd seen them take other young families, people with kids. Was I too old, too unimportant? The thought stung, but I pushed it down. I wasn't one to wallow. Still, the loneliness was a weight heavier than the water. I kept picturing Clara's face, her worried eyes when she'd begged me to leave. Mama, come with us. Why hadn't I listened? Pride, that's what it was. Stubborn, foolish pride. I'd wanted to prove I could handle it, that I didn't need anyone. Now, here I was, trapped in my own attic, with nothing but a flickering flashlight and a mysterious box worth more than I could fathom. Sometime, on that fifth day, I heard a new sound, a low, rhythmic thumping, a helicopter. I scrambled to the attic window, nearly slipping on the damp wood. Through the rain-streaked glass, I saw it hovering over the neighborhood, its blades slicing the air. My heart leaped. I banged on the window, shouting, my voice raw, Here, I'm here. But the helicopter moved on, its spotlight sweeping over other houses. I sank to my knees, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. They hadn't seen me, or maybe they hadn't cared to look. Hours later, the rain slowed, but the damage was done. The water was up to the attic floor now, cold and oily, lapping at my feet. I climbed onto the trunk, clutching the Bitcoin wallet tighter. I didn't know much about this digital money, but Tommy's words echoed in my head. Millions, Grandma. I laughed, a bitter sound. What good was a fortune if I was stuck here, drowning in my own home? I started talking to Carl, like I did sometimes when the nights got too quiet. What do I do, love? I whispered. How do I get out of this? But Carl was gone, and so was everyone else. It was just me and the water. Then, a miracle, or so I thought. A boat's motor growled outside. I stumbled to the window, my hands shaking. A small rescue boat, manned by 2 volunteers in orange vests, was navigating the flooded street. I waved frantically, screaming, until my throat burned. They saw me. One of them, a young woman with a ponytail, shouted, "Hold on, ma'am, we're coming." They tied the boat to my porch railing, now half submerged, and one climbed up to the attic window. He was soaked, his face grim but kind. "We've got you, ma'am. Let's go." I grabbed the Bitcoin wallet and a small bag with my ID and a photo of Carl and the kids. That was all I could carry. They helped me into the boat, my legs trembling, as I stepped into the cold water. The neighborhood was unrecognizably lake of brown water, rooftops peeking out like islands. We passed houses with broken windows, cars half sunk, trees bent low. The volunteers were quiet, focused, steering through the debris. I kept looking back at my house, its faded blue paint barely visible above the waterline. That was my life, sinking away, and Clara, where was she? Why hadn't she come for me? They took me to a shelter, a high school gym packed with cots and people, all of us shell-shocked, wrapped in blankets that smelled of bleach. I sat there, clutching my bag, the Bitcoin wallet still tied against my chest. A volunteer handed me a bottle of water and a granola bar, but I couldn't eat. My mind was spinning. My home was gone. My family hadn't come. And yet, in my sweater, I carried a secret worth $48 million. What was I supposed to do with that? I didn't even know how to use it. All I knew was that I was alone, and the world I'd built over decades had washed away in a matter of days. The high school gym was a blur of noise and movement, a sea of cots and weary faces lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The air smelled of damp clothes and instant coffee, and I sat on the edge of a cot, my hands clutching the little black box inside my sweater. I was safe, yes, but safety felt hollow when everything else was gone. My home, my memories, my sense of belonging, all swept away by the flood. I kept waiting for Clara to walk through the gym doors, her arms open, her voice calling, "Mama." But the hours ticked by, and she didn't come. Neither did Tommy or little Ben. The silence from my family was a wound deeper than the water's destruction. Had they really abandoned me? I pushed the thought away, but it clung like the damp chill in my bones. The volunteers were kind, bustling around with blankets and styrofoam cups of soup, but they couldn't fill the emptiness. I overheard snippets of their conversations: dead, thousands displaced, entire neighborhoods underwater. Houston was a war zone, they said, and the recovery would take years, years. I was 68. My knees ached, and my savings were modest at best. How was I supposed to start over? I looked down at the Bitcoin wallet, its sleek surface catching the gym's light. Tommy's voice echoed in my mind. "Millions, Grandma." I didn't understand it, not really. I'd never even used a smartphone properly, but I knew it was valuable, and it was all I had left, besides the clothes on my back and a crumpled photo of Carl and the kids. Days turned into a week at the shelter. I tried calling Clara, borrowing a volunteer's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I left messages, my voice shaking. "Clara, honey, it's Mama. I'm at the shelter on Westheimer. Please come get me." Nothing. I asked a volunteer to check on my house, but she came back with a grim shake of her head. "It's gone, ma'am. The whole block's underwater. Gone." My vegetable patch, my porch swing, the little table where I'd graded papers for 35 years, all reduced to mud and ruin. I cried then, quiet sobs muffled by my blanket, not wanting to draw attention. I'd always been the strong one, the one who baked cookies for the neighborhood kids, who kept going after Carl's death, but this was too much. I started noticing the other survivors: an old man with a cane, muttering about his lost dog, a young mother rocking a baby, her eyes red from crying. We were all broken in our own ways, but we shared stories, clinging to each other's voices like lifelines. I told them about my teaching days, about Carl's laugh, about Tommy's wild ideas. I didn't mention the Bitcoin. It felt too big, too unreal, like a secret I wasn't ready to share. But at night, when the gym was quiet, I'd hold the wallet and wonder, could it really be worth $48 million? And if it was, how would I even access it? Tommy had set it up, but I didn't know the passwords, the codes, any of it. It was a fortune, and it was useless in my trembling hands. After 10 days, a social worker came by, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Evelyn, we're trying to find you temporary housing," she said, her voice gentle but tired. "Do you have family who can take you in?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "My daughter, Clara, she's in Austin." I think the social worker nodded, jotting something down. "We'll try to reach her. In the meantime, we've got a spot in a senior apartment complex. It's not much, but it's dry. That word felt like a luxury. I nodded, too exhausted to argue, and they moved me to a small, beige apartment an hour outside Houston. It had a lumpy bed, a tiny kitchen, and walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's TV. It wasn't home, but it was a roof. The days there were long and lonely. I kept the Bitcoin wallet on a shelf, hidden under a scarf. I didn't trust banks, not after hearing stories of people losing everything to fraud or fees. But I was scared, too scared of losing it, scared of someone finding out. I tried calling Clara again, and this time, she picked up. Her voice was distant, rushed. "Mama, I'm so glad you're okay. We've been so busy here, Austin's crazy, and the boys." She trailed off. I waited, hoping for an apology, an explanation. None came. "Can you come get me, Clara?" I asked, my voice small. I lost everything." There was a pause, too long. "We'll figure something out, Mama. I'll call you soon." She didn't. Weeks passed, and the calls stopped altogether. I heard from a neighbor that Clara had moved to Dallas, chasing a new job. She hadn't told me. My own daughter had left me behind. The hurt was a physical thing, a weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I'd raised Clara alone after Carl died, poured everything into her love, time, every penny I had, and now, she was gone, just like my home. I started to wonder if I'd been wrong about everything. Had I been too stubborn, too proud? Had I pushed her away? I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every choice. The Bitcoin wallet sat on its shelf, a silent reminder of Tommy's gift. But even that felt tainted. Why hadn't he called? Was he ashamed? Too busy? Or did he just not care? The weeks in that beige apartment stretched into months, each day blending into the next like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. I'd wake up to the hum of the neighbor's TV, make myself a cup of instant coffee, and sit by the window, watching cars pass on a road that led nowhere I wanted to go. The Bitcoin wallet stayed on its shelf, hidden under that scarf, a secret I guarded like a fragile heirloom. I didn't dare touch it. Not yet. It was my last tether to Tommy, to hope, but it also terrified me. What if I lost it? What if I couldn't figure out how to use it? I was a woman who still wrote checks at the grocery store, who'd never trusted online banking. The idea of digital millions felt like a fairy tale, too good to be true in a world that had taken so much. I tried to rebuild, piece by piece. The social worker helped me file for FEMA aid, but the process was a maze of paperwork and long waits on hold. My house was deemed a total loss, and the insurance payout was a fraction of what I'd hoped, barely enough to cover a few months' rent. I'd call the FEMA office, my voice steady but my hands shaking, only to be told to wait longer. "We're overwhelmed, ma'am," they'd say, and I'd hang up, feeling smaller each time. I started selling what little I had left, some jewelry, a few of Carl's old tools to pay for groceries and bills. Every sale felt like letting go of another piece of myself. The loneliness was the hardest part. I'd always been surrounded by people, students, neighbors, my family. Now, the silence was deafening. I'd walk to the corner store, hoping to see a familiar face, but Houston wasn't the same. The flood had scattered my neighbors, my community. I'd pass boarded-up houses, empty lots where homes once stood, and feel the weight of it all. I kept calling Clara, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. "Honey, it's Mama. Just checking in. I'm okay, but I miss you." I'd wait, hoping, but the phone stayed silent. I heard through a friend that Clara was thriving in Dallas, posting pictures online of her new apartment, her boys at a baseball game. She looked happy, and that hurt more than anything. How could she move on so icily, leaving me behind? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the Bitcoin wallet from its hiding place and held it, my fingers tracing its edges. I remembered Tommy's excitement, his voice full of dreams. "Grandma, this could change your life." I hadn't believed him then, but now, with nothing left, I wondered. I borrowed a laptop from the apartment manager, a kind woman named Rosa who'd taken a liking to me. She showed me how to search online, and I typed Bitcoin with trembling fingers. The numbers I saw made my heart stop. Bitcoin was worth over $20,000 per coin. Tommy had said he'd put a small amount in the wallet, but even a fraction of that could be millions. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Was this real? Could this little box really hold $48 million? But there was a problem. I didn't know how to access it. Tommy had set up the wallet, given me a string of words, a seed phrase. He called it scribbled on a piece of paper I'd tucked away with the wallet. But the paper was gone, lost in the flood. Without it, the wallet was locked, a treasure chest without a key. I felt a surge of panic, then anger. Why hadn't Tommy explained it better? Why hadn't he checked on me? I tried calling him, but his number was disconnected. I searched online for him, my hands clumsy on the keyboard, and found his social media. He was in California now, working for some tech company, posting about his new life. Not a word about me, not a call, not a visit. My own grandson, the one who'd given me this fortune, had left me to drown. I sank into the chair, tears streaming down my face. I'd lost my home, my family, my sense of who I was. But I wasn't done yet. I'd survived 68 years, raised a daughter, buried a husband, taught generations of kids. I wasn't going to let this break me. I started researching late into the night, learning about Bitcoin, wallets, recovery. It was overwhelming. Words like blockchain and private keys swam in my head, but I kept going. I found online forums where people talked about recovering lost wallets, and I reached out, my messages halting and unsure. I'm an old lady with a Bitcoin wallet I can't access. I wrote, please help. To my surprise, people responded. Strangers, mostly young folks like Tommy, offered advice. A man named Sam from Seattle, spent hours on a video call, walking me through the basics. He was patient, his voice calm, like he was teaching a child. You need the seed phrase, Evelyn, he said. Without it, it's nearly impossible. My heart sank, but he didn't give up. There are ways to try. Do you remember anything about the phrase? Any words? I racked my brain, picturing Tommy's handwriting. I remembered one word, freedom, because it had struck me as poetic. Sam said it was a start. He connected me with a tech group that specialized in wallet recovery, but they warned it could cost thousands, maybe more. Thousands I didn't have. I lay awake that night, staring at the wallet. It was a lifeline, but it was also a trap. Even if I recovered it, what then? Would it bring Clara back? Would it rebuild my home, my life? I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months: determination. I wasn't going to let this fortune slip away, not after everything, but I also wasn't going to let it define me. I'd survived the flood, the abandonment, the loneliness. I could survive this, too. The months dragged on, and that little beige apartment became my world, as small and confining as a birdcage. I'd wake each morning with a heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes from carrying too many unanswered questions. Why had Clara stopped calling? Why had Tommy, my bright-eyed grandson, left me with a fortune I couldn't touch? I'd sit at the wobbly kitchen table, sipping weak coffee, staring at the Bitcoin wallet like it was a puzzle box from one of Carl's old mystery novels. It was worth $48 million at least. That's what the internet said, but to me, it was just a cold, black rectangle, mocking my ignorance. I'd lost my home, my family, my sense of safety, and now I was wrestling with a technology I barely understood. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I kept at it, spending hours on Rosa's borrowed laptop, my eyes straining against the glare of the screen. The online forums became my lifeline, filled with voices from strangers who didn't know me but cared enough to help. Sam, the kind man from Seattle, checked in weekly, guiding me through the maze of cryptocurrency. He told me about a wallet, a process that sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, using computers to guess millions of combinations until one unlocked the treasure. But it wasn't simple. The tech group he'd connected me with quoted $10,000 just to start. And even then, success wasn't guaranteed. I had maybe $2,000 left from the insurance payout, barely enough for rent and food. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind howling, with a fortune just out of reach. I started piecing together memories of Tommy's seed phrase, freedom. I'd remembered, but there were 11 other words, and my mind was a fog. I'd lie awake at night, replaying that Christmas when he gave me the wallet, his voice so full of excitement. Write it down, Grandma, and keep it safe, he'd said. I had, hadn't I? I pictured the scrap of paper, tucked into the box with Carl's records. The flood had taken that, too. I cursed myself for not being more careful, for not listening when Tommy tried to explain, but I also felt a spark of anger at him, at Clara, at the world. They'd left me to fend for myself, and now I had to fight for this, too. I took a chance and sold my mother's pearl necklace, the one she'd worn at her wedding. It broke my heart, but it fetched $3,000, enough to hire the tech group for a preliminary try. They warned me it could take months, even years, to crack the wallet without the full phrase. I nodded, my hands clasped tight to hide their trembling. Do what you can, I said. They started their work, and I waited, each day a mix of hope and dread. I'd check the Bitcoin price obsessively, watching it climb, then dip, each fluctuation a twist in my gut. What if it crashed before I could access it? What if I'd sold my necklace for nothing? Meanwhile, life in the apartment was a grind. The FEMA aid came through, but it was a trickle $5,000, barely enough to cover basics. I applied for senior housing programs, filled out forms until my fingers cramped, but the waiting lists were years long. I'd walk to the library, the only place I felt connected to the world, and read about other flood survivors. Some had rebuilt, others had given up, moving away or sinking into despair. I refused to be the latter. I'd sit in the library's quiet corner, writing down every word I could remember from Tommy's phrase freedom, maybe sunrise, maybe river. I'd close my eyes, picturing his handwriting, willing my memory to sharpen. One day, Rosa knocked on my door, her face soft with concern. Evelyn, you okay? You look like you haven't slept in weeks. I hadn't, not really. I invited her in, and over tea, I told her everything. The flood, Clara's silence, the Bitcoin. Her eyes widened, but she didn't laugh or call me crazy. You're a fighter, Evelyn, she said. You'll figure this out. Her words were a balm, a reminder that I wasn't invisible. I started opening up to others in the apartment complex, sharing stories of the flood, of Carl, of the life I'd lost. They listened, and I listened to them, and slowly, a new kind of family formed, not blood, but born of shared struggle. Still, the pain of Clara's abandonment lingered. I'd see mothers and daughters at the store, laughing together, and feel a pang so sharp it stole my breath. I wrote her a letter, pouring out my hurt, my love, my confusion. Clara, I don't know why you've gone quiet, but I'm still here, still your mama. Please talk to me. I mailed it to her last known address in Dallas, but it came back unopened. I cried for days, but I also felt a shift. I couldn't wait for her anymore. I had to live for myself. The tech group called one rainy afternoon, their voice cautious but hopeful. We've narrowed it down to a few thousand combinations, Evelyn. We're getting closer. My heart raced. Closer to $48 million. Closer to a new start, but also closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. What would I do with that kind of money? Would it heal the hole Clara had left? Would it bring Tommy back? I didn't know, but I was ready to find out. The rain never stopped reminding me of that August, even months later, as it tapped against the apartment's thin windows. Each drop was a memory of the flood, of the water that stole my home, and the silence that stole my family. I was 68, alone, and fighting for a fortune I could barely comprehend. The Bitcoin wallet sat on my shelf, a silent promise and a nagging mystery. The tech group was still working, their emails full of jargon. I struggled to follow hash rates, cryptographic algorithms, brute force attempts. They'd narrowed the seed phrase combinations to under 1,000, they said, but it could still take months. I'd spent nearly all my savings on their efforts, and every day without a breakthrough felt like a gamble I was losing. Yet, I kept going, driven by something I hadn't felt in years, a fire in my belly, a refusal to let this beat me. I started taking computer classes at the library, free sessions for seniors. The teacher, a young woman with bright red glasses, was patient as I fumbled with keyboards and browsers. You're a quick learner, Evelyn, she'd say, and I'd blush, feeling like a schoolgirl again. I was learning about Bitcoin, about wallets, about the blockchain, a word that sounded like a child's toy but was somehow the backbone of this digital world. I'd sit there, scribbling notes, my hands cramped but my mind alive. I was doing this for me, not just for the money, but for the woman I'd been before, the flood, someone who faced challenges head-on, who taught kids to believe in themselves. I wanted her back. The apartment complex became my anchor. Rosa invited me to weekly potlucks, where tenants shared whatever they could afford, canned beans, dye old bread, sometimes a homemade tamale. We'd sit in the courtyard, swapping stories of survival. There was Miguel, who'd lost his auto shop to the flood, and Sarah, a widow like me, whose kids lived far away. They didn't know about the Bitcoin, but they knew my heart, my hurt over Clara, my worry for Tommy. Family's complicated, Sarah said one night, her eyes soft. But you've got us now. I smiled, my throat tight, and realized she was right. These strangers had become my people, filling a void I thought only blood could fill. One evening, I got an email from the tech group. My heart pounded as I opened it. We've cracked it, Evelyn. We found your seed phrase. I stared at the screen, my breath caught. They'd recovered the wallet. It held 2,400 Bitcoin, worth $48 million at the current price. I sat back, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face. It was real. After all the loss, the abandonment, the nights of doubt, I had something to hold on to, but the victory felt bittersweet. What was $48 million without Clara's laugh, without Tommy's wild grin? I called Sam, my voice trembling. What do I do now? He chuckled softly. You live, Evelyn. You decide what that money means for you. I spent days thinking about it. I could buy a new house, travel the world, live a life most only dream of. But the flood had taught me something. Things don't make a home. People do. I started small, paying off my debts, moving to a better apartment with a view of a park. I donated to the library, funding their computer classes for others like me. I set up a fund for flood survivors, helping families rebuild what Harvey had taken. It felt good, like I was giving back to the city that had shaped me, even if it had broken me, too. I wrote to Clara again, not expecting a reply but needing to try. I forgive you, I wrote. I love you, always. To my shock, she called a week later. Her voice was small, ashamed. Mama, I'm so sorry. I was overwhelmed, scared. I didn't know how to face you. We talked for hours, crying, laughing, rebuilding a bridge I thought was gone. She visited with the boys, and when Tommy hugged me, I held on tight, whispering, You changed my life, kid. He didn't know about the wallet yet, but I'd tell him soon. The Bitcoin was a gift, but it wasn't my salvation. That came from within, from the stubborn, scrappy woman who refused to drown in water or in grief. I'd lost everything, but I'd found something, too. Resilience, community, a new way to see the world. I'm 69 now, and I'm not done. Life's too big for that. So, I keep learning, keep loving, keep fighting, and that little black box, it's still on my shelf, not as a treasure, but as a reminder. Even when the world washes away, you can build it back, one step at a time.